much for coming. I mean, Friday morning after this week, it's amazing that anyone can get up this early at all. I'm Yngvill, and I run a small studio called Henchmen and Goon out of Norway. And last year, oh, by the way, if you can turn off your noise-making devices, that would be great. I run a company called Henchmen and Goon, and last year we released our game Pode to Nintendo Switch, and we just launched on PS4 last month. One of my main tasks on Pode was art direction, and that's what I'll be talking about today for the most part. But first, I want to show you our launch trailer, so you can keep what I'm talking about fresh in mind. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to start at the very beginning. When we were developing Pode, we had some guiding principles that we stuck to. The idea was to make a family-friendly game, not necessarily a children's game, but a game children could participate in playing and enjoy without feeling left out or unable to contribute. We wanted to stay clear of any negative action. Even non-violent games today have you destroy objects for loot or materials, but we wanted everything to be about growth and positive actions. So that meant no negative impact on the game world, and everything you do as a player should be about adding something to your surroundings. We wanted a relaxing game, which meant we had to stay clear of any stressful situation. So there's no time pressure, no enemies, no danger, and no dying in our game. We wanted it to be accessible to anyone, regardless of age, location, or level of education, which meant no text and no speech. We wanted the game to promote positivity and compassion, to connect people and make them want to help each other. And lastly, we wanted the possibility for asymmetric co-op when playing with kids or inexperienced players. These guidelines had a big impact on the visual direction that we took. Having a slow-paced game where people spend a lot of time in one place solving puzzles meant the surroundings had to be interesting and engaging. It needed to be bright, positive, eye-catching, and interesting to look at. It had to be a pleasant place, cozy and relaxing, a place where you'd want to hang out. And we wanted to give it a feeling of mystery to push the player to explore, make them want to know more about the world and characters and background. The asymmetric gameplay meant the less active player needed stuff to do. They should be able to interact with their surroundings, not just for puzzle solving. And things had to feel alive, and it had to be fun and interesting during downtime. We wanted them to be able to play around with the world, twirl in the grass, splash in the water, and paint in the world as they played. The world also needed to reinforce the positivity of the theme and morale of the game. We did want mystery and secrets, but nothing scary, so that had to really come through in the atmosphere. We wanted interaction, but without negative results, so anything you make happen in the game should give you a good feeling. And we wanted there to be a positive change from start to finish. Give the player the feeling that they had a positive impact on the world. So when you start a level, it's dull and barren, but when you finish, it's lush and colorful, and it feels inviting. We didn't really have a clear idea of what Pode would look like, and the early concepts didn't have any particular direction, but one thing that stayed consistent are the characters. They are the focus of the game, and for the story to work, we needed the player to feel connection to them. As we explored, this cute, cartoony style started to emerge, but we still didn't have a clear direction, so we kind of turned to games and movies we liked for inspiration. And what stuck out to us was the cultural influences that you see in a lot of things. For example, you see a lot of Japanese influences in pop culture today. And this sort of had us switch our focus a little bit and look at our own culture and maybe try to build on that. So history time. I love history time, it's fun. Since the Viking era, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark have been in and out of unions. The latest union involving all three was the Kalmar Union, which ended in 1521 when Sweden withdrew and elected their own king. And the Danish king and nobles decided that Norway should become a dependency of Denmark. So fast forward to 1814, Denmark was forced to give Norway to Sweden due to intricacies of the Napoleonic Wars. And Norway, unaware of the treaty between Sweden and Denmark, was pissed off, which prompted the writing of our own constitution, leading to full liberation in 1905 and the importation of a Danish prince to be our king. And backtracking a little bit, Norway went on a quest for its soul. In the mid-1800s, the national romantic movement in arts was big in the Nordics, but in Norway, it became more. It became about figuring out what is actually Norwegian. What were we without the influence of Sweden and Denmark? And it's been an important and defining era in Norwegian cultural history, which is still very present today in both art, literature, architecture, and politics. So going back to my previous points, we now had something that fit all the criteria we'd set for the visual design. It's bright and colorful, it's eye-catching, and it's interesting to look at. It's pleasant and cozy, the motifs are relaxing, and the environments are beautiful. It's mysterious, especially the landscapes. You kind of want to enter them and explore, and there's almost a supernatural atmosphere to them. So finally having a solid direction, we started going deeper into the material to identify the main visual characteristics of the era, and we found 4 cornerstones to build our visual design on. You have colorful, swirly plants and flowers, which are found in rose paintings, embroidery, and carvings. We have evocative natural environments with a fairy tale-like atmosphere. A maximalistic expression. I mean, everything is in abundance and excessively ornate. And there's a lot of fine detail. You see this in art, jewelry, and everything, as well as everyday objects. So having our foundation, we now needed to look at what challenges we would be facing. Apart from the obvious challenges of building a super detailed, organic, growing, and ever-changing world, the 2 things that had the potential to get us in some real trouble were that we were a very small team and we had very limited time and money to make our game. At this point, the company had just split in half, so we started the project with only 4 people. And due to the split, and that we wanted time to work on game development, we had drastically cut down on contract work. So we certainly had some challenges to overcome during this project. None of us had been doing this on a big scale before, so we had to figure out everything as we went. Eventually, we did find the funds, and we were able to grow our team to 7, but that's another story. Anyway, we didn't want to scrap the game or stray from the core idea, so we needed to find ways to efficiently produce a lot of content in as little time as possible. The most important thing we did was to create modular world building and decorative assets. We made a small set of generic assets for the entire game, including walls, floors, filler plants, and some decorative elements. And from these, we created multiple combinations, some of them generic and some of them level-specific. Then we had a small set of level-specific plant assets to give each level its distinct look. Mushrooms and pine cones for the pine woods level, and cloudberries and cotton grass for the birch woods, and so on and so on. We did the same with textures. We had some generic textures with a few variations, and level-specific textures with different colors and patterns. And this approach makes each level feel new in spite of the reuse of assets. Unique floral and crystal combinations give each level the feel of its own shape and texture. The combination of generic assets and level-specific assets give the impression of a much bigger variety than there actually is. And the unique color scheme for each level reinforce the idea that when you enter a new level, everything is completely different from what you've seen so far. Another thing we did was to make small playable areas. There are 9 different levels in the game, all based on different parts of Norwegian nature. And each level is split into smaller rooms. Varying the size of the rooms prevents the feeling of repetition. So going from a tiny room to a more open one, shifting from moving in depth to moving horizontally or vertically. Completely closed-in rooms versus open area ones, always keeping the navigational space relatively small, but giving the illusion of big, open, bottomless spaces. The small size means there is less repetition in use of different plants and combinations. So we could create variation in flora, not only from level to level, but also from room to room. Introducing new level-specific plants and crystals and combinations the further into a level you go makes it feel like the world is constantly evolving throughout the game. Having a fixed camera made it easier to have control of floral compositions. All compositions are set up to grow in a pattern relative to the camera, and this gives a less random and more decorative feel, emphasizing the influence of traditional rose painting, which would be incredibly difficult to pull off if the player could view the compositions from different angles. Having full control of what the player would see at any given time made optimization easier, as we could limit the use of growing and moving objects. And it's what allowed us to do grass the way we did as well. It looks absolutely horrible from the wrong angle, and it's nothing but visual trickery that makes it look lush and beautiful. It also opened up for extensive use of fake lighting. All the bleeding volumetric light in this game is fake. It's all just transparent gradients on planes. And these are also used to create color gradients in some places, as well as shades and vignettes. And this only works because we have 100% control of the angle it's seen from. When it comes to animation, we face some issues. Getting the growing right was very important for our idea to work. There was no point having a living, growing world if it didn't move or feel right. And this became a constant battle between optimization and our visual goals. We had growing, moving stuff absolutely everywhere, so even in the smallest levels, we had latency issues. Most objects were okay to work with. We could just use scaling and a bit of rotation, and this worked for crystals, moss, small flowers, and all kinds of rigid objects, where we just used simple low-poly models and no animation. Sorry, no idle animation. Plants and combinations were a bit more tricky. We had a lot of swirly plants, and rose painting, although it has no animation, the dynamics of the paintings makes it easy to imagine the movements they should have. It needed to feel like it was growing in an organic and natural way. We started out with a lot of morphing objects, but luckily we discovered that this was only necessary for a few things. And combined with scale and rotation, it gave the impression of natural growth. So for this, the amount of objects actually worked in our favor, which was nice for a change. And combined with the speed of growth, it helped the illusion, as you never really focus on one single object. We used the same approach for idle animation, where after a plant has grown, we switched it from a dynamic object to a rigid object with slight rotation, just to give the impression of constant movement and life. And this had a massive impact on latency issues as well. For plant and crystal clusters, we started out with everything being separately triggered to grow. We figured we wanted people to move around and kind of just like make everything grow as they went. But we kind of discovered that this wouldn't work with large collections of plants. And we wanted control of how the combinations grew and looked, and for it to be less of a hassle for the player to grow everything in a room. So we decided on using a few triggers spread out through each level to set off a cascading bloom, and we created a tool to set up our growing objects in sequence. This also let us control the timing between each step in a sequence, so everything could be perfectly timed. The grass is a combination of single triggers and sequencing to give the player a bit more freedom. So if you trigger the grass and stay still, it will keep growing, but the spread is slower than the character's movement. So if you move around while using the glow ability, you'll get to paint it in yourself. All these things combined gives the player the impression of full freedom to grow the world, but with us having enough control so the world feels cohesive and everything grows with a nice flow. So what did we learn from making Pode? It's been a very steep learning curve for us, being a small and inexperienced team, and we certainly made our share of mistakes along the way. Some of the things we're taking away from this is you need to work smart. Streamline your pipeline, because with a small team, there is absolutely no time for idleness. Make few and reusable assets. You really just need enough variation not to hinder the creative process or make the game feel repetitive. You need to be constantly cutting everything not vital to your core goals. I mean, the phrase "kill your darlings" is cliche for a reason, right? You simply can't create quality content if you don't have the time or resources to do so. You have to be ruthless. Build your game with a machete. Focus on what's most important and perfect that. You have to make sure not to lose track of your goals. Visual design is really just a tool to help tell a story. And for us, it's a growing, evolving world telling the story of a growing friendship and evolving emotions. Our increasingly detailed and beautiful world mirrors how empathy, selflessness, and cooperation makes the world more beautiful and less scary. And entering into uncertainty together may reveal things about yourself you didn't know. And lastly, fake everything. If the player can't see it, why bother? So by trying our best to follow these rules, in the end, we managed, without mentionable resources, to create a finely detailed, excessively decorated world with a distinct, recognizable look that sets it apart from other games, and that we feel help tell the story of our two star-crossed friends. And that's it. Thank you so much for coming to my talk. I think we have time for a few questions. Yeah? So if anyone has any questions for me? I think we have microphones on either side of or in either aisle here. Okay. Have a good day, everyone.
Question.
Oh, you have a question, okay.
I was curious, since everything's about like the growth of plants, how your approach to like differentiating levels from each other through color was, since you're probably going to tend towards staying towards like greenery, how you work within that to differentiate.
So like I said, we had, there were the 9 different levels, and each of those are based on different parts of Norwegian nature. So we have kind of a level that represents the fjords, and we have one representing the high mountains, the glaciers, and stuff like that. So what we did was taking our color schemes from each of those areas and kind of finding what is unique to that area and how can we use the color scheme on our already existing assets to make it to have that come through in the game.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
How long did it take to develop the game from start to finish, and how much of that time was spent on the pre-production and the art style?
So we started the game in June of 2015. So it took roughly 3 years for the entire thing to be finished. And to be honest, it was, being such a small team, being only 4 people in the start, it's a lot of back and forth between all, like finding a style, starting the production. So everything was sort of parallel for the first few years. And although we had the direction that we wanted to take, it was kind of a long way to get that, to finally kind of nail that look. So it's a difficult question to answer because it's not like the first 3 months are pre-production.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming. And remember to fill out the evaluation form that you should have gotten on your email already. And happy GDC, everyone.